Hey, good of you to drop in. Today in the wood shop, I'm going to make a useful item for any kitchen, and that's a trivet. And if you don't know what that is, it's something to set a hot pan on so it doesn't scorch your countertop or table. They come in all varieties. Some are cork, cloth, or even straw, but I'm going to make some out of wood. And I'm going to use 4 different types of wood in 4 different styles. So if you want to see what I can come up with, stick around. You could even make and sell these in your woodworking business. I started out this project like most, rough cutting some boards down to length on the miter saw. Then it was on to the planer, or thicknesser as they call it in some countries. These are all boards off my sawmill, so they're dried to slightly different thicknesses. So I'm bringing them down to all roughly the same. I've got 4 different species of wood and 4 different designs in mind for each one. I've got hickory, red cedar, whatever that spalted wood is, and some sort of oak. Then it's back to the miter saw to cut them down to final size. I left them longer than I would need so I could cut off any snipe left by the planer and also pick what I thought was the best looking portion of the boards. So I'm looking over each one on each side and deciding what to cut off and what to save. I just squared up one end on the hickory board and we'll go from there. That one isn't very wide, so I left it a little bit more in length, so it ended up rectangular where the others will be roughly square. And I'll show you the final dimensions on each one later. The cedar board has a live edge on each side, so I'm keeping that on that one. So I'm making the first cuts kind of freehand, just holding part of the live edge against the fence to get it close to final size. Then to make the final cut, I use another board to square up to the fence, then hold the live edge board against it to get the 2 cuts parallel. Then I come to that spalted wood. Hard to decide what to cut away and what to keep on that one.
What should I pick?
After some contemplation, I cut a little off one end to get rid of a few wormholes. Then after much more contemplation, some measuring, and staring at it, and flipping it over, and more looking, and more flipping, more measuring, I finally decided to split the difference and cut off some of the other end. Now you know why it takes me so long to get videos out. Anyway, like I said, I have different designs in mind, so I'm lopping off the corners on this hickory board and just at random angles, because that's the design on this one. Angular, but in a sort of chaotic, no pattern type way. I'm just sort of winging it on these, just going with whatever my brain happens to come up with to make them all radically different. On the spalted board, I'm just laying out a grid dividing it into quarters each way. That'll do for what I've got in mind for this one. On the oak board, I go corner to corner to find a center point, then mark lines from there to start out on that one. And that one goes to the drill press, where I start with a 30mm Forstner bit for the center hole. And again here I've set the depth to not drill all the way through, but just poke the center point through so I can finish the cut from the other side. That way I don't get any tear out. Nice clean hole. Then I move out from the center and use a 22mm bit for these next ones, using the same method for drilling from each side. That works pretty well. So I continue on, and you've no doubt figured out that the design on this one is just a pattern of holes radiating out from the center and decreasing in size. So the outermost holes are using a 15 millimeter bit. I think the measurements I used to locate these holes were an inch in from the edge of the board to center for these, and the middle ones were at 2 1/8 inches in, which looked good for spacing, but I didn't take into consideration that I was going to do a round over on these holes using a 1/2 inch radius bit. So that affected the look, and you'll see it in the finished product. I would space the middle holes a bit more toward the center one if I did it again. At this point I liked it, but I decided to drill more holes on the diagonals as well. I marked some lines, decided on spacing, and since I had the small bit in the drill press already, figured I'd drill those holes first and then the middle ones. These were located an 1 5/8 in from the corner, and the middle ones at 3 1/8 inch from the corner. So then I changed out the bit and started drilling out the middle ones, and got one hole drilled all the way through. Then realized I'd grabbed the wrong bit, and it was smaller than the other middle holes. It was an 18 millimeter instead of the 22. Oops. Oh well, too late now. I'll just go with it and pretend that was by design. Nobody'll ever know. That's the beauty of these, though. You can make them any way you want, even by mistake. So that's the pattern on this one. Then it's time for the roundovers. I used a 1/2 inch roundover bit and did all the insides of the holes and all the outer edges. The only problem I had was after I cut the first side, when I went to do the holes on the other side, the bearing on the bit was going to ride a bit below center, meaning it would make a bigger roundover on that side because it was riding on the part that was partially cut away by the first pass. So I had to readjust the bit height a bit to compensate. So just be aware of that if you use this method to make one. Notice that after the roundovers, the outer and middle holes on the horizontal and vertical lines are close, so it might be better to move the 22 millimeter hole over a bit, or maybe it would have been better if I had just used the 18 for those in the first place. For the hickory one, I just drew random geometric shapes on it that I will cut out with the jigsaw, so I'm drilling pilot holes for that. And the cedar one, I just drew some flowing shapes in line with the grain of the wood that I thought would go well with that pronounced grain pattern. And I'll cut those out with a jigsaw as well, so again, I'm just drilling holes to start the saw in. So, cutting out shapes on the hickory one first. You've seen this before, not much to see here except I hit a very hard spot and literally smoked this blade. Hot, hot. I got a new blade and finished it up, and that was the basic shape on that one. Then I decided to cut in a few random notches on the edges just to make it a little more angular. Still making a little smoke, but the blade lasted it out. And there's the final shape. Then the cedar one. It's a much softer wood, so no smoking on this one. Just lots of sawdust. And that's basically what that one will look like. I know I look like I'm going to start welding here with these gloves, but I'm going to be using a rather aggressive tool on the handheld grinder, so this is just a precaution. I wanted to make these kind of swoop into the wood from the ends inward, and this is the way I chose to do it. This thing is a somewhat imprecise tool, and it can remove a lot of material very quickly, so I have to be careful and use it with a light touch. It's doing what I want it to do, though. That's what it looks like, kind of a high-speed rasp. It's got some weight and gyroscopic force when you're using it, too. Back to that hard hickory. I took it to the router table to put some chamfers on the edges. I wanted to chamfer the insides of the holes in it too, but this proved to lead to a bunch of handwork because the bearing on that bit couldn't get into the sharp angled corners. But I did what I could with the router bit. I had to move the fence to reach the center hole. And of course I did both sides on all edges. Then I changed out the bit to a V-groove to do the pattern on the spalted wood board. I wanted to keep as much of that beautiful wood as possible, so I chose to just groove it. I did all the outer ones with the fence, but the fence wouldn't go back far enough to let me do the center one, so I had to remove it and clamp on a temporary fence for that. Once I had that set up, I could finish the cuts on this one. Routing sure does make a lot of dust. So there's that one. I think my fence may have moved a bit since it doesn't look like the top and bottom grooves quite line up, but no big deal. I also decided to reinstall the chamfer bit and do all the edges on this one too. That looks a little better. Decided to hit the corners too. Milling all done on that one. So I kind of screwed up on the design of this one a little bit, and I wanted these chamfers to run all the way out to the corners, and of course with the bearing on the chamfering bit, it didn't get into the corners, so I'm having to chisel these out, but I got these too close, so the chamfers are running into one another here and there, so it's not going to be perfect, but I'll just do the best I can. So this hickory one with all the angles turned out to be quite a bit of handwork. I had to do a lot of chiseling and filing, and it was pretty tedious and time consuming. Needless to say, I probably wouldn't do this design again, and it actually turned out to be my least favorite of the four. If I did decide to make another one like this, I'd probably use a softer wood, which would make all this handwork a lot easier. That side looks pretty good. Now I got to do it all over again. Once I got all the pieces pretty much to final shape, then came the sanding. And boy, let me tell you what, there was a lot of sanding. There was power sanding, there was hand sanding, and there was both of those things times 4, because I thought it would be fun to make 4 of them. You know that t-shirt I have? Well, I did steps 3 through 9 over a couple of days. Just call me Dusty. And then I had to throw in step 10 at least a couple times. The detail sander would probably help out a lot on some of these shapes. I started using mine from the cheap tool store. It lasted about 10 minutes and then the sanding head just fell apart. I should make a video about my love-hate relationship with Harbor Freight. And I'll give you another quick tip. Get quality bits for your router. I'm still using the cheap ones and they don't stay sharp very long and end up putting scorch marks on your work. And guess what? That just leads to extra sanding. Anyway, during all this sanding frenzy, I noticed this. So I discovered a little problem with this one. We have this bad spot right here, and there's a crack right there. So I could glue that back in, but that wouldn't solve that problem. So we may just remove a little bit of that, make it a feature. And if I remove some of this, I'll probably do something similar over here, just to make it look like I intended to do that. So we'll see how that turns out. So it was back to the semi-controlled destruction tool, and I did a little contouring on both edges so they kind of match in a sort of symmetrical way. Then, since that's a pretty rough tool, it needed more sanding. Hand sanding mostly, back to 80 grit. Oh yeah, there was the fact that there was hand sanding and power sanding with 80 grit times 4, and then there was hand sanding and power sanding with 120 grit times 4. Did I mention that there was a lot of sanding? So after sufficiently clogging my shop vac filter, I was finally done with sanding these trivets, and they were ready for some finish.
Well, it's about time.
Here are the final measurements on each one, just if you want to duplicate any of these. For finish, I'm just going with tung oil again, since these are for use in the kitchen around food. It's pretty easy to apply, looks good, and gives them some protection. I use a rag to rub it in normally, but with all the holes and nooks and crannies on these, I figured a brush would work better. Basically, you just give it a good soaking coat, leave it sit an hour or so to soak in, then rag it off. I'll give them 2 coats and let them sit a day in between coats. I think it really brings out the beauty of the wood, especially the more dramatically grained woods. It made the sapwood on the cedar one a little blotchy though. I wouldn't have thought it would do that, but it's not horrible. So here they are. I'll show you each one. So we'll start out with this one. This one is out of some sort of oak that was from here on the property off of my sawmill. This one was fairly easy to make, just drilling holes with the drill press and rounding them over with the router. The only thing I'd do different on this one is these 2 holes ended up to be pretty close to each other with once I put the roundovers on them. So I would move this hole over just a little bit or use a little smaller bit. This one was the size that I drilled by accident by grabbing the wrong bit, and it would actually fit in there a little better. I believe that's a 22 millimeter and this was an 18, if I recall. But that one turned out very well. I like it. This one is probably my favorite. Just because of the wood. It's beautiful. And these are all, by the way, with 1 coat of tung oil on them, put on, let soak for an hour, and then wiped it off. I'll probably put on another coat, but for now they're good. But this one was real easy to make, just V-grooves on the router. This is in the center, and then in the center again, so quarters and both ways. And then I also did the edges with a chamfer. So this one turned out real good, I think, and I like that one. I like this one also, very beautiful wood, the red cedar. Only thing with this one that was kind of weird is the tung oil kind of made the sapwood here blotchy. It doesn't look horrible, but it was a nice lighter wood when before I put the tung oil on there. See how blotchy it got? So keep that in mind if you use that kind of wood. This one is probably my least favorite design. It's a very contemporary design, and I'm more farmhouse rustic in my taste. But in this one, I like the wood. I love the hickory. I think it's a very good looking wood, very hard and hard to work. So for doing all these facets, these chamfers, there was a lot of hand work with a chisel and a file in the corners. So keep that in mind if you wanted to make one like this. Make it out of a softer wood. It'd be a lot easier to work. The only other thing about this one, other than it being very hard to work, was when I drew these designs on there, I just kind of did it haphazardly and with no rhyme or reason in mind. And I ended up, once I put the chamfers on here, I got close to one another here in some of these corners, like here and then over here. So if you make something like this, just keep that in mind. If I did it over again, I'd change these around a little bit so there's a little more space in between. But other than that, this design would go well on the hickory also. Fairly easy to work with just a drill press and a router. So that's it. That's 4 designs that give you some ideas on if you want to make some of these for yourself. Or if you want to make them and sell them in your woodworking business. They'd also make great gifts. So that'll about do it for this time. Thanks for watching. See you next time.